Hi, everyone. We are here today with a panel discussion called Flash in the Classroom. We have three teachers of Flash. We have Shireen Moriyama, Michael Chiniszewski, and Kelly Pedro. Kelly Pedro is a Pushcart Prize nominated writer. She is the winner of the Craft Literary Flash Prose Prize, the Writers Union of Canada's Short Prize Competitions for Emerging Writers, and the recipient of the 2024 SmokeLong Fellowship for Emerging Writers. She's based in Kitchener, Ontario, and writes fiction, flash, book reviews, and creative nonfiction. She is an experienced journalist and creative writing teacher, and has taught journalism and creative writing at Wilfrid Laurier University and the University of Guelph. She's an associate Flash editor at JMWW and currently finishing an MFA in creative writing at the University of, there it is again, Guelph. She is working on a novel that has received funding support from the University of Guelph and SSHRC. Kelly Pedro, welcome. Now tell me how to pronounce that.
University of Guelph.
I said it right.
Yeah, and Wilfrid Laurier University. I'm sorry that I have so many challenging words in there for you.
It's my fault. And I've introduced you several times before. Did I come across Guelph then too?
No, I actually just finished my MFA, so I realized I have to update my bio. So I'm not currently finishing it. It's done. It's behind me.
Congratulations. Okay, so tell us just briefly your experience in creative writing classes with Flash.
Yeah, so I teach writing Flash narratives with adult learners in the continuing studies program at Guelph, and they're doing a creative writing certificate. And I also teach Flash in undergraduate courses at Laurier. And some of my colleagues have caught on that I teach Flash, so now they're starting to invite me to do guest lectures in their classes and revising Flash. So lots of different Flash categories happening over here. Excellent.
Well, we can't wait to hear what you have to say. Now, our second panelist is our good friend, Michael Chiniszewski, is the author of three collections of stories: Elephants in Our Bedroom, Chicago Stories. This is not current. You're the author of a couple more. He is an assistant professor at Missouri State University, where he edits Moon City Review and serves as both literary and managing editor for Moon City Press. In 2010, he received a fellowship from the National Endowments of the Arts, and you've received 2 Pushcart Prizes, right? Or more?
No, it's 2.
It's just 2.
It's just 2.
I was hoping to wish you a happy birthday with another one, but no one gave me.
That's good. If you have that power, that would really be awesome.
I wish I did.
Give out Pushcart prizes to players on their birthday.
Yeah. Actually, I could do that as a scam, and I would be very, very popular. Okay, so Mike, that was your bio at SmokeLong, so we need to update that, don't we?
A little bit.
Yeah. Okay, so Mike, tell us your experience with Flash in the classroom.
I teach at Missouri State University, and I teach fiction level workshops at every level. Actually, I have a course this semester at every level. And most of those, the upper level ones, I teach Flash fiction as an option. When students turn in their workshop submissions, they have an option of either doing a novel excerpt, a short story, like a quote unquote regular short story, or a packet of Flash where they have to turn in 3 Flash fiction pieces. And I would say there's a good number of people. There's around 20 people in every class, and I probably get about 5 people every round that turn in Flash fiction. There's some people that are regulars that they've kind of taken on Flash as just what they do here, like automatically. Like I have students who are regular Flash writers, and that's what they want to do. And then I have a lot of students who just try it once and maybe they like it and maybe they have some skill there, and they're encouraged and they go on with it, or then they go back to something else sometimes too. But yeah, that's worked into the curriculum pretty evenly. I also use Flash collections in my classroom. I've used the SmokeLong quarterly printed anthology. That's been a while since I used that, but best microfiction, best small fictions. I use that Ghost Parachute anthology that just came out over the summer. In my summer, I had a 3-week summer class where I focused on flash fiction. So yeah, that's a legitimate option here at my university, where if you are a creative writing major or you're just a casual student, you want to pursue that, you can do that, and it's worked into the curriculum.
Perfect. Okay. And again, I can't wait to hear more. Our third panelist is Shireen Murayama. Shireen Murayama's most recent hybrid publication, The Mother Who Couldn't Describe a Thing If She Could, was published in 2025 by Small Harbor Press. Her other books of poetry include Hey Girl, Are You in the Experimental Group? And Housebreak. Her work has been published in Wigleaf, SmokeLong Quarterly, Flash Frog, The McNeese Review, No Tokens, and many others. Her work has been anthologized in Best Microfiction, and other recognitions include being a Pushcart Prize nominee, Best of the Net Poetry and Essay and Flash Fiction nominee, and a finalist for Craft's Creative Nonfiction Award. She is the recipient of a Poets and Writers 5/50 debut authors, the Prospect Street Writers House Residency in Vermont, and has been given guest readings, has given guest readings for the Barracuda writing community in New York, the Bad Betty Press Tour in Bristol and London, as well as the Attleboro and Gloucester Poetry Festivals. She lives and writes in Honolulu, Hawaii, which has power. I'm so glad that you have power, because Shireen emailed me last night and said, I don't know, because they didn't have power. Hi, Shireen.
Aloha. Good morning, everybody.
It's great to see you.
Thank you.
So tell us just a little bit about your experience with Flash in the classroom.
So Flash in the classroom, maybe for the past 4 years, I've been teaching this summer transition class from the 8th graders to 9th grade. I teach the high school level at Kaiser High School. And the students are pretty, they come from, they come with skills. Like it's like a very affluent kind of community on that side of the island. So these 8th graders going to 9th grade, they get a little introduction from me on high school writing, analysis skills, things that will help them transition and succeed in high school. And that's where flash fiction comes in.
Yeah, and I love that. And that's one reason I was so excited to have you on this panel, because Flash is not only something for university classes or the workshop that we love, just because the creative writing workshop, online workshop, is for us something that is just part of life now. But the creative writing workshop is not so old. Okay, I think the Iowa Writers Workshop was founded in 1936, and so people have not been workshopping writing for so long, and so we've taken it to this heightened level very quickly, and it's generally. Let's start with that question, or you can think about it, Shireen, and I'll come back to it, and I'll start with another question. How is it possible at the high school level to integrate contemporary, so what I call metamodern flash narratives at the high school level, because some of them are not appropriate for 15-year-olds?
True. You definitely have to screen a lot of the flash, which I don't have. I have a whole collection of things that I can use, cannot use. It also depends on the personality of the cohort that's coming up. So I'd like to have a variety. But yeah, so I mean, generally, I start off like with George Saunders' Sticks, right? Because that's kind of like my classic go-to for them to introduce flash fiction. And then I pair it with poetry because I'm also a poet, with Chen Chen's self-portrait as so much potential, and to try to see how these two narratives about their positions and roles in a family and what are the expectations and what are they pushing against. And that's kind of my introduction before we move on to like form versus function. So that's just one way that I start the introduction, and they start to grapple with comprehension of what's going on.
Yeah, because Flash, I have to say, Flash texts are used at the high school level quite often on for tests, and like tests. I'm not sure what the tests are called, but because I'm blanking out on that. But for comprehension, because it's important to have a short text. And so, for example, one of our editors, Helen Rye, her story 1 in 23, which won the Bath Flash Fiction Award, is on standardized tests in the UK. So Flash is used on standardized tests all the time at the high school level. Go hey, Mike. Mike from Michael G. Is your middle name Gerard? Sorry.
Wait, why did you know that?
Oh, wait a minute. Is it? Because it says Michael G. And I just guessed Gerard.
What? That's so weird you would say that of all the names first.
Wait, is it?
I usually make people guess, like students. I had a semester where the whole semester I would let them guess one a day, and they never got it.
Wait a minute. Is it Gerard?
You got it the first guess. That's so weird.
Okay, just a second. I can't pronounce your name, but I got your middle name right. Okay.
That's so weird.
I know. Isn't it?
Like,
Okay.
and I meant to write "Go Hell," like "Go Hell" and get it on the standardized testing. I just
okay.
edited it, and
Exactly.
now it's become a big distraction.
Okay, exactly. So standardized tests use flash length narratives quite often. So I mean, this is a tangent, but it's true. It's one use of the flash narrative. Okay, so we're going to come back to the high school in just a second, but we're going to ask a general question that is timely, and I want each of the panelists to respond to this. Do flash writers today write differently than flash writers 30, 40 years ago? And if so, does that change the way we teach writing today? Being aware that flash writers now write differently than 40 years ago.
Sure. I'll say absolutely. It's been around 30 years since I was in my MFA program in undergrad. And I started doing short narratives like then, and I would turn these things in and just thinking like, oh, well, that's just the thing I wrote. And people were calling me like an experimental writer, just simply based on length and not even based on like anything I was doing with syntax or structure or forms or anything. You know, I people in my program and even professors were like, well, Mike, he's like an experimental guy. And I'm like, I never felt like I earned that just because I was writing shorter pieces. But yeah, I think that's one thing to note if you're looking back historically, like Flash was looked at as like, wow, you're doing something really, really different. And, you know, there had been Flash fiction, and, you know, I had read shorter pieces before. I mean, you know, there's writers who were writing back then, you know, there's like the Diane Williams, that like whole sect of people and their syntactical rules, and, you know, stemming from the Gordon Lish people. And, you know, some of those Raymond Carver stories kind of feel like Flash fiction. And then, you know, someone who doesn't get a lot of credit in this world is Sandra Cisneros for The House on Mango Street, a book that I read in high school and I read again in college and I still go back to as like, you know, that's like a little novella in Flash. is all that is, and it's just a really beautiful book. So I didn't think I was doing anything like I was recreating fiction or trying to be avant-garde, but like, so I think when somebody did that, like back then, it was looked at really strangely. Whereas now, I think it's, I explained what I do in school in my classes, and I don't think anybody's looking at it as like, oh wow, you're doing something really different or experimental. You're just using a different form. And then, we could have arguments about like the validity of that versus the other forms and the other lengths. But yeah, that's kind of what I think it's definitely looked upon as like just something people can do. Like, like if you wrote a story in 1985 that was in second person, you were considered some kind of like Lori Moore avant-garde person, where now, like, people just do that, or the communal narrator. Like, you could be like, oh yeah, I could name all the communal narrator stories that have ever been published in the history of like literature. And now people just like whip those out and turn those into workshop. And I see those submitted to the Moon City Review all the time. I think Flash is the same way. It's just another tool in the tool belt, I think, now, whereas before you were making a big choice, and I don't think that's true anymore.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to come back with a couple of questions, but let's give Kelly or Shireen a chance to jump in.
Yeah, I can go. I agree with what Michael said. I think, even in my MFA program, like I was the only Flash writer, but no one considered me experimental. They just considered me a short form writer. But I think for a long time, like Flash was just taught as its own like short story that you could kind of work into a creative writing program and show all the elements, like you mentioned, Chris, like on a standardized test. And now I think it's being taught much more as its own distinct form, separate from, a short story, and having its own kind of characteristics. And I even see that now with like I teach a course that's a standalone writing Flash narratives course. And I think in the past, there would be a tendency to weave Flash more into a short story course. Whereas now, in my experience up here in Canada, I don't really know, in Ontario specifically, it is kind of breaking out as its own course much more, as a recognition of its own distinct form.
Yeah, and this is really a very topical challenge because as I think Mike and I were talking, we know of another university who's offering a curriculum Flash. So it is being accepted more as its own distinct form, and that's what we really want to nail down today, how we would teach this new distinct form. It's nothing new. In fact, I'm writing an article and learning so much. The short form, the very short form, is older than the novel. It's older than the short story. It's older than poetry. So, I mean, it's kind of maybe the same, or, it's like poetry and Flash kind of have this space that they both occupy together, which is nice. So we want to think this idea of now 6,000 years later, after we began writing things down, we now want to start thinking of a narratology of Flash. How do we teach this distinct form? Shireen, do you want to jump in?
I think for the attention span of the high school students, the form of teaching Flash fiction works well. So
I agree, but there's a type of Flash that is less challenging than other types of Flash. A challenging Flash that I like to give people is K-Ming Chang's Vengeance that we published and won Best of the Net. This Flash is quite challenging. and maybe not the type of Flash that Sticks by George Sanders is. It's not the same thing. So Flash is not Flash, right? So there are, just as a novel is not always the same type of novel, Flash is not always the same type of Flash. And so it's very important to choose the type of Flash that serves your purpose. And so what is that type of Flash at the high school level?
Alrighty. So, I mean, I think normally, like I try to introduce the Flash, right, with the poetry, and then I get the students to kind of understand, like, well, what is its form? Like, what is it doing, right? And I try to convince them that all the writers are intentional, like every line is kind of there. So when you go through like like a Matthew Olsman, have you ever read the Mountain Dew commercial disguised as a love poem?
Uh-huh.
Right. So, and it's just this long narrative about this guy who's so in love, and he, like, how he, like, is convinced this girl that, he knows she loves her because, like, she double underlines all the things that she thinks is important, and that he should read it too. And it just goes on with these details. And the students is like, wow, this is a really long poem, is. And till you get to the end about the whole Mountain Dew thing, when she didn't have any money and she spent her last money to buy him a Mountain Dew. There's no other food in the fridge except for that, because he had once said that he liked Mountain Dew. And then you do that, and then I pair that with, like, let's see, so I do use a lot of SmokeLong Quarterly Flash, like William Tong Seabrook's Manatees.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
that, yeah, with Manatees, and it's a short narrative, right? And then work with the students as far as like form and function. Like, what is the reason why we have this poem in this long form versus like this short narrative on manatees and what's going on at the end. And so those are just some of the ways.
Oh, I
Um,
like the contrast. I like,
yeah, and which the whole point when I teach is to make sure that by the end of this unit, the students have no clue like how to describe it. Like, they just have this inherent feeling of, well, it's this and it's this, and then they can do the whole convergence, kind of Venn diagram map thing, whatever. But yeah, I know I would have reached my goal teaching if the students are totally complex and mind boggled, and they keep thinking about the differences between when to use this form versus that form.
oh, that's beautiful. And manatees is gross, and so I'm sure they love that. Yeah.
I
Oh,
do something, if I can jump in, I do something very similar with my second years. And as Shireen, where right in week one, I throw them into the deep end and I have them read Kim McGowan's Mad Lib and Gwen's Shit Cassandra Saw, just to really upset any expectations they have about what the form is. Because sometimes, so often, it's just trying to get them to not think of it as a short story.
exactly. Both of those disrupt how we think of writing because Cassandra Saw is a list story, and of course Mad Lib is a Mad Lib. It has become a classic. I hope Kim's here so she can hear me say this. It has become a classic hermit crab story, which is easy. It's not easy, so it's always a feat because a successful Flash story is never easy, but it feels unrepeatable. You can't repeat it.
Yeah.
It's like if someone wrote a Mad Lib, like Kim McGowan's Mad Lib, somebody said, "Oh, Kim McGowan's already done that."
Yes, exactly.
But in a creative writing class, you might give it as an assignment and saying to people, just be careful because, of course, it can feel quite derivative because it is such a specific hermit crab. Yeah. All right. So really great examples. What do you think, Kelly? Should we be thinking about teaching the flash narrative differently than we teach the short story?
I do. And I kind of like frame it to my students as this. I use this race analogy. So I tell them, a novel's like a marathon. And you're in it for the long haul, and you're going to be there a while. You're going to really endure with the characters. A short story is like a 5K. It's accessible. It's not quite as grueling as a marathon. And Flash is like the 100-meter dash. It's exciting and it's over before you know it. But what makes it exciting is, the urgency and the compression of the race, right? You flub the opening and you can't really get to the end of the track successfully. And I tell them, like, all the athletes who compete in each race are runners, but they all use different skills and train differently for their respective races. They're all running complete races. So you wouldn't say that the 100-meter sprint is not a complete race. It's a complete race. And it is a real race, even though it's not a marathon. And so I kind of use that analogy, like there might be some crossover between how the athletes train, but you can't use the strategy and technique of a 100-meter sprint in a marathon. It wouldn't necessarily work. So in terms of like the differences of teaching like short story and Flash, I find particularly framing it that way with something that is like familiar to them addresses a lot of like the vague or answers a lot of that like vague question that they have of what is Flash and how do I understand it as something different and distinct than a short story. So I've found that really effective in getting them to help wrap their minds around the differences and thinking about, how compression and urgency in a 100-meter dash is the same kind of compression and urgency that you need in a Flash story to successfully pull it off. I don't want to keep blabbing. I can talk more about that, but I'm happy to let other folks jump into if they want.
I think somebody said in the chat, we love the analogy. I love the analogy, and I use the marathon runner as the novelist in my article. But of course, as you've heard me say before, for me the Flash rider is the professional platform diver. Once they leave that board, they have a word count to get to the water, and what they do in that time is the laws of nature. But I actually love your analogy and would love to cite that as well. The thing is, we train differently, and that's what we want to really focus on, is that the training is the teaching. So when we teach Flash, and we're not thinking of the 100-meter runner, and our only thing is, well, yeah, just write something under 1,000 words, but use the mind of a novelist. Well, as I think we have. We at SmokeLong read 14,000 submissions a year, and so we know a flash length narrative is different from a flash narrative. A narrative that is flash length is under 1,000 words, but it may sound like a short story. Mm-hmm. And that's the 800-meter runner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one exercise that I have my students do, which is really helps them understand, is I do this like Post-it note exercise where I have them in their workshop groups. I always kind of have them do group things in their workshop groups to kind of build that rapport. Plot out a short story. Suvantham Themavong says how to pronounce knife. Suvantham's a Canadian writer. And that's a very well-known short story in Canada. And then I have them plot out eating stale biscuits. You can criticize, which I love teaching that story. And they can kind of see how like it is still a complete story, but everything is compressed. You know, you still have the elements there, but there is a tightening effect in eating stale biscuits and versus the bit more of the sprawl, right? You take a little bit longer to get through each one. And then I also challenge them to, you know, think about intention in their flash stories, free write words of intention, and then force them to compress them, to tell those stories in 400 words, 250 words, 50 words, 6 words, to really think about what is the core and how do I tell a story that still has a beginning, middle, and end in this compressed space.
Yeah. And eating stale biscuit, there's a little bit more to the title, right?
Yeah.
But
Eating
it's
stale, it's in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
that's right. And yeah.
Cutting them off. I keep cutting the titles off. Sorry.
No, it's okay because it's a SmokeLong story. So if you just at SmokeLong, if you just put in eating stale biscuits, you'll find it. But long titles make our front page look wonky. So I really, really, really do have to love a story to accept it with this huge long title that's going to make our front page just look like what happened here. So, I mean, it's a stupid technical issue, but it's like, it makes me think, I might want the person to change the title from la 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 to just beefsteak. So I don't know, but shit, Cassandra saw that she didn't tell the Trojans because by then, fuck them anyway. Of course, we would have published that story even if it had been 12 feet longer. Yeah. Now, eating stale biscuits in the middle of the Pacific, is quite a layered story. So it's to outline that story or to summarize that story is quite a task, and it's flash. So
Yeah, but I love using that as an example because it gives them a sense of like depth, you know, the layering and the depth that you can still accomplish in a flash. You know, it's not trite. And so I think that's why I love teaching it. But sorry, I'll stop taking up so much space now.
no. Sorry, thank you. Mike, do you have a favorite story that you use again and again and again? No, and don't use one of mine. I said that just as Kelly was taking a drink, and I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Don't spit."
Wow, just one particular story. I mean, I teach sticks. I taught sticks a lot by George Saunders because it's in so many anthologies, and that's just really accessible, and it's also just really great. You know, I think "Girl" by Jamaica Kincaid shows up in every anthology, so I probably used that before I even really realized I was trying to use flash fiction. That's probably the most read flash fiction piece because it is just so anthologized everywhere. And you know, and I give my students like options, like you have to read so many stories from this book, and everybody reads that because they, of course, go to the table of contents and they look for the shortest things that they have to read, and they pick the 5 shortest things in the book. So it's like everyone always does "Girl" by Joe, and that's a great because that's a list story. You know, it's just like this historical narrative story. It has so many tones. I mean, I think that's a really complete piece of flash fiction. I don't think she really writes any other flash fiction pieces. And I don't think George Saunders does either. So, you know, I've taught Gwen's book before in my class a couple of times. I teach Kim McGowan's books because firstly I publish them, but also because she writes flash. Same thing with Michelle.
Michelle Ross.
Michelle Ross. Sorry, I'm just name dropping people by first names. But you know, Kelly brought up this really interesting. I love this track and field metaphor. I think it's great, and I can't wait to like actually use that in my classes. So I'm stealing that immediately. I mean, I've had one that I've kind of always used as a tip for writing flash, and that's, you know, it's like running a mile in 4 minutes. You know, when you're writing a flash fiction piece, like you have like, they cut that mile up into 4 laps, and they have pacers. Like somebody just broke. This is exciting because somebody just broke the mile record like about a month ago for the first time in 30 years. But they just have people that run laps with you to keep pace with you, so you can like run faster. And I think it's interesting. But I've always used the note, like if you're going to run a mile in 4 minutes, and after the first lap you're at 1:45, you're probably not going to run a mile in 4 minutes. You're probably going to give that up. And I think it's the same thing with Flash. Like if you're trying to write a Flash fiction piece of 1,000 words or less, accepting that as kind of like the benchmark or the word cutoff for a lot of the Flash magazines, including SmokeLong.
Mm.
And you're not even really into your story very far, and you're still trying to introduce the scene and the characters and the contrast, and you're already at like 700 words. You're probably not going to get that. That's not going to be a Flash fiction piece, which is okay, because you could always make it a longer story, or you could go back and change it. Or sometimes when I do that and I'm like, wow, I really need to kind of write a Flash here, for whatever reason you would have to do that. You would have to you either have to go back, or you just decide that's not going to be it. So, I kind of teach pacing a lot, is what I'm getting at here. When people are doing Flash, there's a rhythm and a pacing to it, and there's parts, like even like Kelly's example of the 100-meter dash. There's parts of that race, like even though it takes 9.85 seconds to run in, there's there's the takeoff, and you have to take off correctly or you're not going to win. If you fumble the launch, you're not going to win. And then there's the kind of this middle part here where you just have to get your speed up, and then there's the ending, and you have to finish well. And a lot of times those races are won by somebody who's not leading at the 5-second mark. So
excellent. Yeah, Kelly, it's a great example, because the start of the sprinter, they train and train and train to get that right. And does the marathon runner train for the start? It's like, no, honey, I'm going to be dealing with exposition for the first 20 pages. I don't need to do anything. I don't need so the marathon runner is just sort of like, oh, okay, it started. I need to get going, right? At some point I need to, trot along. But the 100 word, 100 word,
100 meter.
the 100 word writer, the 100 meter runner trains religiously on that, that moment. And that's what we keep coming back to, this in medias res, this idea of a Flash really from the moment you read the first word of the title, you have begun the story. And it's the same for other narratives, but it has a different meaning in Flash. Okay. We're going to go to our first breakout room, and I want you to discuss one of these topics, okay? And we're going to come back, and so all of these are provocative topics. And just write down the one that you think is the most provocative. Can a Flash narrative develop character? Is present tense really more exciting than the past? And when is white space just empty space? Okay, so 3 provocative questions which you can take to the breakout room. We're gonna break out for 8 minutes, and remember, you're thinking about teaching. How would you teach these ideas? Okay, so one less than that. Here we go. You have 8 minutes in the breakout room. Welcome back, everyone. We are having a lovely discussion with our panelists, Michael Shinajewski, Kelly Pedro, and Shireen Moriyama, who are all teachers in various ways of the Flash narrative. Shireen Moriyama teaches high school. Kelly Pedro teaches continuing education for adults. Is that the phrase also in Canada?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And And Michael Chiniszewski teaches at the university level. Let's talk about experimentation. And Kelly, since you're on my screen, um, uh, what do you think? And this is a trick question, I know. Is it easier to experiment with Flash or with 700-page novels?
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it's easier to experiment with Flash.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah.
Let's talk about experimentation. Um, do you have success with experimentation?
In terms of teaching it with my students, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I do a section on hermit crabs.
Yeah.
Both with, so I teach adults and I also teach second year undergrad students. We call them second years here. I think you might call them sophomores in the US. I noticed that my adult continuing ed students really struggle with hermit crabs, like really struggle. And the second years absolutely love it. They really.
Interesting. So so what we call non-trad, your continuing education for adults are non-traditional students. They might be like my age,
Mhm.
and going back and just learning Flash or something. But your second year students are 19 years old.
Yeah, they're like 19 years old. I mean, it's a second year course. So theoretically, I could have third years or fourth years in it. But yeah, they're younger and they are, I don't know, like I would be curious to hear Mike's, thoughts on this too, but they seem to be more open. They like really throw it against the wall with experimentation. Like I could put anything up and say like, write this as, a recipe and they would lean into it and
Let me just jump in there. Hermit crab, what Kelly is explaining right now, writing a story as a recipe or as a letter. The original hermit crab idea was to write it as a letter, which is very easy. Probably the easiest hermit crab, or write it as a eviction notice, or you're writing it as a document that is not usually a story.
yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, you're borrowing a found form, right? So if you think about it as you're borrowing a form and so I just find they are much more open to experimenting and not that my adult learners aren't like I find like a week or two later, they'll email me and they're like, I really didn't like that at first, but now I'm getting it. Like they just take longer to get there, whereas
Let me be the devil's advocate here, Kelly. What if it's because that non-traditional or adult writer was taking the course because they really wanted to delve into something that was important to them, and the kind of experimentation was something that they didn't actually want to do. They wanted to do something else.
Yeah, I find too, like to pick up on that, the adult learners are much more into literary fiction, whereas like the younger, they're into sci-fi, they're into fantasy, they're into romantasy or whatever. And so I think that I think that is part of it. I think that part of what the adults struggle with is that they think, oh, I can't tell a serious story as a hermit crab. And then we start talking about, well, here are examples, right? Like, well, I'll talk about Disha Philia's pop quiz for white women who think Black women should be nicer to them in conversations about race. We'll talk about that. Like, that's a really heavy, weighty story that's talking about really heavy, weighted themes. It's very serious.
Exactly. And this is exactly what we are working on in SmokeLong Fitness this week. We're working on the double frame narrative of metamodernism, that outer frame of the shell, the hermit crab, actually, the hermit crab shell of the narrative, and that inner very profound, emotionally effective story that you have ensconced within it. And that's what is interesting these days, and something that we're writing these days that we weren't writing maybe 40 years ago. So I think it's good. Shireen, let me ask you, are
Mm-hmm.
you said you teach eighth and ninth grade?
Well, they're ninth grade. I just
Eighth and
teach
ninth grade. So they're a little
yeah,
bit like they're 14.
yeah, they're
14.
young.
Are 14-year-olds willing to experiment?
Yeah, for
Excellent.
sure. Yeah. Like again, so usually I start with poetry, but then when I throw them like a prose poem, or I throw them anything that doesn't look like a poem, like a list poem, then they're like, wait, what? Like, what is this? And then also similar with the Flash. So they're willing to experiment. I've not used Kim McGowan's Mad Lib with them. But I think that's something that like definitely the hermit crab fiction form might be something if I were teaching a longer unit for sure. It's just a short, like
So
midweek class.
Kim McGowan's Mad Lib might be problematic, but tell me if you think it is. It is definitely about sexual abuse and possibly even about rape. Would that be a problem?
Yeah, so probably on something like that, I would have to like make sure that I have an alternate for the parents to like say yes or no.
Hmm.
Um, but even some of the pieces that are a little bit more political, I always just make sure that I have clearance for because they're at such a younger age. But if it were like an AP Lit class or something, I just, would go with the trigger and the letter to home.
Hmm. Yeah, it is. It is problematic, and I think maybe it is a tangent. But I taught at the British school in Phuket, Thailand. I taught a workshop for 180 15 and 16-year-olds in a big auditorium. And it went well. I could tell that maybe half of them were doing what I wanted, and maybe half of them were saying, I want to curse right now, but screw this, right? But that's teenagers, right? So and actually it's the non-trads as well. They're like, what? I don't want to do this. And so I guess what we're saying is it's only the second year students who are willing to do it. No, but I'm joking. But what I found that my contact person was saying, well, I want to give the students so that they can read SmokeLong Quarterly. I want to suggest to them, www.smokelong.com, and can I encourage them to read SmokeLong? And I thought, well, not everything at SmokeLong is appropriate for a 15-year-old. I have to say, yeah, there are a few stories on SmokeLong that are X-rated, I would say. They go there. So it is controversial that we have so much online available to teaching fodder, right? But at the high school level, we have to make sure it's appropriate. But they have your 14-year-olds have access to SmokeLong. They could read whatever they wanted.
They do. They actually have, I introduced them to like this category of literary magazines, and they're like, what? What is that? And I provide them of various websites, right, that they can read and they try, and one of the assignments is to like bring back a piece. Why did you gravitate towards it and kind of like explain what's happening? And so they do. And I have no control as far as what they read, as a teenager, right? But teaching them how to fish and how to introduce them to various lit magazines, I mean, I think that's invaluable.
Yes, definitely. And we want to go there in just a second. I want to give Mike an opportunity to talk about experimentation. And then I do want to close our discussion with utilizing the online artifacts. But Mike, how do you experiment?
How do I experiment? I try things. I mean, flash fiction is really good for prompts. I mean, there's just some things that have become forms, some things that have names. Like, what's the name for like when you start every paragraph with the same sentence and then you write variations of it? I think somebody told me there was a name for that, but that's just where in my brain I just like, oh, let's have 5 paragraphs and start them all with the same sentence or image.
Well, it's some sort of anaphora.
Okay, yeah, that's the word I was thinking of.
It's some variation of it before some pedant in the group says it's not. Some variation of it. Go ahead.
But I think experimentation is and I tell my students this: experimentation in Flash is really important because you could do things in a 2-page story just to try it, and there's benefits to that. For one, you're not investing 2 years of your life like you would be in an experimental novel. Okay, then if you're writing a flash fiction collection and you have something ultra experimental and it doesn't work, it's okay because like the person just moves on to the next story and there's maybe something not that experimental and they just get it. Because I'm thinking of like Donald Barthelme's like 40 or 60 stories where it's like, I love Donald Barthelme, but I've always hesitated to use his books in class because I honestly don't know what some of those stories are doing or trying to do. And I'm afraid that I would like put this in front of students and be like, oh, teacher, you made us buy this book and chose it for class. I don't understand this story. Explain it to me. And I'd be like, I don't know. Like, it's weird. Like, there's really cool stories in there, like, like The Game and, like, The School that, like, everybody reads. And they know those Donald Barthelme stories. And it's really clear to understand what's going on there. But then there's pieces where I've read them 50 times. Not 50, but, like, a dozen times. And I'm like, what? I think Amelia Gray's books are like that, too, where it's like, what's that thick one that's her second one, the really big one that came out? Like, there's stuff in there that I can't explain, but I like it. I like reading it. I like the experience of it. Lindsay Hunter's books were like that for me when I got into where it was just like, what's going on here? Like with some of these, I really like it. I like the tone and I like the themes that these writers are employing in this. Could I write a paper about it, like for a class? No, I couldn't. So experimentation allows you to do things like that as a writer because you're investing less time. It's like, hey, I have an idea. I'm trying to write a story in a way that maybe I've never written or maybe nobody's ever written a story in before, and that's really good. And if it doesn't go well, that's fine. I've only dedicated 2 pages in so many days of my writing like existence to that. And the same thing for the reader. You're only investing so much. So if something like a writer tries something and it doesn't work, you don't necessarily like feel like you've spent your whole like vacation on the beach reading this like flash fiction piece that like whatever experimentation thing that doesn't really strike you.
Exactly. And I think that flash piece, but even longer, it doesn't matter the form, but that piece that you read and you think, I have absolutely no idea what that was supposed to be. I think that's a good example of the postmodern narrative that didn't mean to make sense. That wasn't the aim of the narrative. It wasn't trying to make sense. It was trying to actually deconstruct what we feel as sense. And that might not be what gets published these days at a flash fiction journal because you kind of actually want some sense there. Although some of our favorite writers, we just had an event with Mel Boswell and Ryan Ridge with their collaborative Climate Strange, a really a romp of maybe 70 micros, lots of micros, that don't necessarily make a lot of sense, but it's a really enjoyable read. Okay, so not everything needs to make sense, I guess. But for high school students, Shireen, does it need to make sense for them?
I think for me, teaching it and what, like my intention of using a piece, it has to make sense to me, at least, so that I can help bridge that information. And for most of the kids, I mean, they're still understanding the how to convey irony and how to identify it, and then trying to practice writing an example of it. And that's kind of where they're at. So
Yeah.
yeah, so in that sense, yeah, a little bit more tangible for them.
As we've seen in the workshop this month, the topic of irony itself is really difficult because there are so many different senses of the word dramatic irony. It's like when seen from a literary perspective, the idea of irony is has so many layers. So and I suppose that's not something that you would tackle at the high school level.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, we besides speaker, world, telltale heart, I mean, another frame, right, is form and
Mhm.
function, and then, but definitely the types of irony, right,
Oh
is another framework for utilizing various flash fictions or poems or
wow.
and
I
things.
want to go to your high school. Yeah. Okay. Let's open up, and anybody from the group can also respond. If you want to, you can respond in the chat, or you can unmute yourselves and talk to us. We want to talk about how we utilize the massive mountain of online artifacts in the classroom. This has changed, right? This when I was at university, we were chiseling things on tablets, and it was really hard because those tablets were very expensive. But you laugh. I was one of the first people to buy a computer, and I was physically sick when I went to buy it because I thought, what am I doing? I'm investing in this. I don't know how to use it. And I think I was the first person to buy a computer. And I had to pay something like $2,500. Yeah, they were massively expensive then. And so, yeah, to put it into perspective, there was no online. But now it's changed the way we teach. Right? Kelly, has it changed the way you teach?
Well, it's definitely made it easier for students to access examples, for sure. Um, Although I tend to overassign readings and then I have to kind of pull back because I'm like, I can't have them read 200 stories over term. Um, so what I tend to do is kind of give optional readings. So I still use like texts like Flash Fiction America. Um, but it is definitely helpful to have access to them online, right? Like, and to have that variety for them too. And I think it also gives the students a lot of um, like buoyancy to see that so many different places are publishing Flash, like
Mhm.
it's, the variety of, you could have Flash published, like if you write fantasy and you kind of want to, there are publishers for almost everything now for different types of Flash. So
Yeah, exactly. But Flash Fiction America is a print anthology, and you can require them to purchase it.
they don't like me to require them to purchase it. They do like us to try to find as many things as they can access either through the library or online, just especially for the adult learners through it for accessibility. But often what I'll have them say is they almost always come back to me and they say, can I have other examples of like anthologies that I can read? And so I will then recommend them Flash Fiction America, Jasmine Sar's collection, The Anchored World, I always say get that one as an ebook because shipping it into Canada can be very pricey.
Exactly. I mean, it could cost $40 just to send it there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Jasmine's, especially if they're interested in fairy tale and the influence of fairy tale on the Flash narrative, Jasmine's collection is stellar. It's very, very good. Mike, how has the online world changed the way you teach?
Oh, I mean, just the same way that everyone else has said, like, there's just this archive of things that exist, like, where you can do it. I mean, as somebody who runs a print press and a print journal, you know, I know that we're kind of losing out on a lot of that. And I try to use anthologies. Like, I've used the SmokeLong Quarterly anthology, the Ghost Parachute one. There's a Bending Genres one that just came out. I'm trying to, like, at least in one class use those to get those books circulated, and I recommend those to people all the time. But you know what? And this is a story that I tell people. Like, when I was really trying to learn Flash and write, and before I sent to SmokeLong Quarterly, and this is going on 20 years ago now or more, I went and I read every story in SmokeLong Quarterly. Now, there's only like 8 issues so far at that point.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit easier than it is today, where issue 93 is what we're working on right now.
93.
Yeah, so, like, that's a lot more, but I literally read the entire thing, and, or then go to Wigleaf and read their, I read, like, everything that was on Wigleaf at the time, too. And, those being kind of the two preeminent journals, that was a good place to start, but, like, you could go anywhere. And I like this idea that there's different journals do different things, and you can find those things. And I just have a big list of Flash journals and websites, and I post that on all my pages for my class. Like, here it is. Like, if you want to write Flash fiction, you should go read. Spend an afternoon reading, 30 stories, and that's time well spent.
Yeah, and we believe that as well. We're doing the archive challenge right now in a SmokeLong Summer, and we have 32 writers doing deep dives into 32 Flash journals. And so, all right. When I tell my kids, Delphine, when I tell my kids and students, I teach French, I had to go to the library and read through all those books, take notes to write that one essay. I know it makes little sense to them. I feel that while online accessibility is brilliant because it makes everything accessible, it's made everything too easy somehow. But now research, I don't know why we want to make research more difficult, though. I remember having to go to Vanderbilt's law library, the JUL library at Vanderbilt, because my university didn't have an adequate library, and I had a friend who let me into the library, worked at the library. It was Janice Ian's wife. I was friends with her, and in Nashville. And she let me into so I hope no one's listening in case that was bad of her to let me in. I'm having my MFA students select a story from an assigned journal and share the story and the journal with the rest of us. That's great. Bless you, Wes. And you're doing this with your MFA students now, so no one has actually shared something yet. Not yet. Okay. So please keep us posted how it goes. Anyone else have a question? We have 5 minutes. A question about teaching Flash and teaching it as a distinct form.
I think Bella has a question there that I'm in the chat, Chris, that I'm happy to answer.
There it is. I missed it somehow. I was wondering if you could briefly talk about how you work with accommodations when teaching Flash fiction, if there are any differences than with students without them. And by accommodations, I like for disabilities or for neurodivergence. Is that what we're talking about? Yep. Okay, Kelly, did you want to respond?
Yeah, because I've had this with my students with my second years or the second year course that I teach. And I try to embed universal kind of design principles into my class. So in the small group, I was talking about how a lot of my students now write by hand if we're doing writing exercises. And so that means I just give them extra time to write, like if I think it might take them 20 minutes, I might give them 30 minutes for that exercise so that I know for sure that they have enough time. And if I have students that have accommodations that allow them to write on like a laptop rather than handwrite, then I just do that, and that's kind of how I take that approach. And I find that that's where it most comes up is with, in-class writing exercises or, extensions on assignments and stuff. But usually it's the in-class writing exercises that really kind of, I would say, it entices students to come up to me and say, I have accommodations and I need stuff. So, yeah.
Okay. Shireen, at the high school level, dealing with this situation in class?
Yeah, similar to Kelly. Like usually if it's going to be an accommodation for extended time, right? So if they're creative writing and they have to turn in like a sample portfolio, yeah, but definitely.
When I taught university in the United States, there was no training, nothing. I had students who became very frustrated in class with timed writing assignments. I had no idea why. Nobody told me. It's like I look back at that time and think, I'm so sorry. Why did nobody train me to know and to be mindful of this? I think that did sort of answer the question. So we have one more question, which I think is a great question because I'm so interested, and I think Mike can probably have something to say. How might you approach teaching Flash to a regular Flash when it's part of a regular class? Because it's so great to teach elements or tools in fiction versus teaching it specifically in a Flash course. What distinctions might you make in each setting? So as you're teaching it as a part of a regular fiction class, how do you differentiate, Mike?
Well, I've done both. So yeah, I've had a couple sections where we focus on Flash fiction. We have a special topics workshop that we can teach here, and I'm trying to fit it into my schedule where I can teach just an entire semester of a workshop. I've only done that in limited summer settings so far. And I look forward to that, to see how many people sign up for that. I assume that a lot of people will, or that's the class that'll fit their schedule and they'll take it, which happens. But, I think I do it as different units, and sometimes we talk about a Flash author or Flash fiction, or sometimes we just talk about other stories. Because like in the intro class, like the gen ed class, that's also for people who are majors, that's just the first class they take. I kind of focus on those anthologized classic stories, like, it's like, let's read Hills Like White Elephants and A Good Man Is Hard to Find and The Lottery, okay? Because I think they should read those stories so they have that cultural literacy. But then then after that is when I kind of throw that out and start going into things. And hey, here's some short stories. Here's like, you should read The Husband Stitch. It's probably the most read and anthologized story of this century. So you should probably read that story. Or before that, it was Brownies by ZZ Packer. Like, everybody read that story for like 20 years in classes, and I think they still do. But it's also like, hey, here's a book. Here's this anthology from SmokeLong or somewhere, or here's this journal, or here's Kim McGowan books, or Avitus's book. I had the year before Kim, we put out Avitus's Carl's book, and here's this book, and it's really amazing. Look at the thing she does. There's a crossword puzzle, and it's a story. And so we kind of approach that differently than like somebody who's not writing that. Like Sarah Freely, we did a book of her stories, and those aren't Flash. So.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if Wes's question is about teaching a fiction class of literary Flash as readers, or as a creative writing class that is multi-layered of flash and short story and novel. Is it reading or writing that you're talking about, Wes? Right.
Oh,
So,
sorry, my bad. It's everybody's exposed because I would say at least 50% of my students in my workshops at this point are really focused on writing novel or novel series of fantasy, sci-fi, or some kind of very intense genre. That's what people. I think it's been like that for at least 5 years now, where series genre novel writing is what most people are focusing on because that's we talk about Harry Potter books and whatever you want to say about J.K. Rowling. I don't have a lot of nice things to say about her, but those books did save reading for a lot of kids and a generation of people, and that's everybody's entryway into reading and writing a lot, and that's what they want to do. So there's even this semester already, it's like I'm working on a 9-book series and I'm on book 4. Do I need to write a synopsis of the first 3 books? And I'm like, yeah, probably. Like, that'd be a good idea. But then, that person on that day, because we'll do 2 different people a day in workshop, that person is paired up like somebody doing book 4, chapter 1 of a fantasy series where like an elf queen demon is the protagonist. Like, the other person up that day is a flash fiction writer who has turned in 3 flash fiction pieces. And it's just like, you kind of merge with traffic. It's like, here, this is fiction. That you have to have characters, you have to have motivation, you have to have plots and setting, no matter what you're doing. And so we should be able to talk about that. So it's just like, jump in. And like, you're going to talk about flash fiction and you're going to talk about fantasy, or you're going to talk about body horrors, the new thing, which is really weird for things, people cutting people up and eating them.
I know.
And it's like, trigger warning, I guess.
Carmen Machado read one of her new stories, and it's definitely that. And my body started ticking, and I was like, "Oh God, it's working! Great story!" Because my body was just like going wild. Okay, so, but now I think Wes's question is: does teaching Flash have an effect on these other the way these other people write their work? So is there a knock-on effect of how Flash is taught and how these other genre writers write?
Yeah, because I see people start the semester by turning in these novel chapters, and then all of a sudden people, maybe not even that semester, but the next semester I have them, they're trying Flash. Because, and maybe they didn't do it because they'd never heard of it before or knew that it existed.
Yeah. And as I understood when I started workshopping my work, Flash writers get more feedback. Flash writers get more excitement from other readers because sometimes when you open a 7,000 word story, the readers are like, "Oh goodness, I don't have time for that," and so Flash writers tend to get more. Okay.
Sure, definitely. If you had your choice, if my students had a choice to read a flash fiction piece or a poem, just based on the form and what it looks like, they're going to pick the flash fiction.
Exactly, and I think that has a lot to do with syntax, that a narrative pulls you through more logically because poetry is often meant to disrupt the way you read and the way you think, and narrative structure that follows. Not all Flash does this, but Flash that follows generally easy to understand syntax is really easier than a poem. Okay, we have to stop there. We're 5 minutes over because this discussion has been very wonderful. Yes, everyone buy Pineville Trace. You can read a review of it. I think it's SmokeLong. I'm sure we reviewed it. Thank you, Shireen. Michael, happy birthday, and Kelly. Thank you so much for coming out on a Saturday to talk to us about Flash in the Classroom. And this is only the beginning I would love for teachers of Flash to come together regularly and share ideas. We would love to do this in the village. We'll be talking to you about this more. We'll be putting this video, of course edited by Video Guy, in the village for people who can start the conversation. Okay, so thank you everyone. And for those of you who are in a SmokeLong Summer, we will be wrapping up the summer next week on August 29th with an open mic farewell event. We'll be giving away some books, and I'll see you in the workshop. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye.